Okay, today Year 5 we are going to look at identifying the use of semicolons, colons and dashes in our writing. So, these are the different types of punctuation marks that we are going to look at today. Now, they are a little tricky to understand, okay, so take your time when going through this video today. So the first one that we have here, this is our semicolon. Now this can be used to link two closely related sentences and separate items in a list together. So when it needs to be closely related, the sentences need to be about the same subject. The colon here, which is our two dots, this can be used to introduce a list, okay? Usually amongst other things, but generally used when you are writing a list for something. And here we have a dash, which we have looked at before, and this can be used to connect or separate phrases and sentences. So let's explore this a little bit further. So semicolons can be used to link two closely related independent clauses instead of using a conjunction. So for independent clauses, those are usually our main clauses. Now we would usually join those two main clauses together with a coordinating conjunction. However, we can replace that coordinating conjunction with a semicolon. So let's have a look at this example and talk through it before we have a go on your own. So the girls are excited about the party. A real magician would be there. Now we could add a conjunction in there to replace it, but instead we've decided to separate the two independent clauses because they are both still related to each other. They are both related to the party, which is the subject. So the semicolon here provides a very smooth transition between these two sentences. Okay, so that semicolon hints to us as the reader that there's a little bit more information that we're going to find out about this party. Now a full stop there would be the end of the sentence and would be too final. And a comma wouldn't be grammatically correct because there wouldn't be a conjunction to follow because it's not a fronted adverbial. So as a comma should not be used to link the two sentences, the best punctuation to use would be a semicolon. So I'd like you to pause the video, have a go, see if you can write a sentence that uses a semicolon. Remember, if it's easier, write two independent clauses, so two main clauses that are about the same subject, and replace the full stop with your semicolon. Pause the video and have a go. Now the semicolon keeps order within a sentence, so we can separate information about a different item in a list. For example, Penny surveyed her shopping, colon. So now we're going to be making a list, but we're going to use the semicolon in that list to separate all of the individual items. So we have potatoes, comma, for the chips, semicolon. So that semicolon there is splitting up the information about the potatoes because we're now going to move on to a different item. Then we have beef for the burgers, again a semicolon because we're separating this information along our sentence, and tomatoes for the tomato ketchup. Now there's no need to add another semicolon here because we're now going to finish our sentence, therefore we need our coordinating conjunction and for our very last item, which is bananas for the banoffee pie. So the semicolon keeps the order of the sentence. Despite the fact we're adding additional information as to what the ingredients in her shopping are for, we are still using that semicolon to split each individual item apart in our sentences. Pause the video and have a go and see if you can write a sentence that uses a semicolon in a list. Okay, moving on to colons. Now colons can be used to expand a sentence, and this is usually by expanding it by linking an independent clause. So we would have to have two main clauses. Now they can introduce an idea that explains, or we can expand on the information from before the colon. For example, the pantomime was a huge success, colon, over 2,000 people had booked tickets to see it. Okay, so the fact from that sentence is that there are 2,000 people booked tickets, and that explains the reason of the information before the colon, which is why the admissions and the pantomime was such a success. So rather than introducing an idea, this expands on the information before the colon. So we know that the pantomime is a success. We're going to add some information that's going to explain why. Pause the video and see if you can have a go at writing your own sentence using a colon. Now, this is where it gets tricky because colons can also be used to introduce a list, which we saw in the example before with the shopping list. So Rachel realised that she disliked cabbage for a number of reasons. Now that phrase, number of reasons, is suggesting to us that we're going to have a list. There's going to be more than one reason as to why Rachel does not like cabbage. So we're now going to list them. So I'm going to introduce my colon and I'm going to expand on my list. So it looked like brains, tasted disgusting, and never filled up. Now, the important thing to remember when you are writing a list, same as the rule from before, when you are about to write that last element of your list, you do not need a comma, but you must use the conjunction and. So, it looks like brains, comma, so we're now going to separate two ideas, two items of our list. Tasted disgusting. Now, as we're going to write the last one, we're going to add and it never filled up. If we were to write that sentence so that it was longer, we would have added a comma here. It never filled her up, and you would use a comma until you were then ready to write the last item of your list, and therefore you would include the word and. So that colon there introduces Rachel's reasons for why she dislikes cabbage. Pause the video and have a go and see if you can write a sentence using a colon that's going to introduce a list. Okay, our last punctuation for the day. So dashes can also be used to separate or connect two independent clauses, so two main clauses. But they are often used in less formal writing. For example, lilies are very pretty flowers. They smell disgusting though. So the dash here creates a gap between the flow and the writing. So there's an anticipation for a little surprise of additional information at the end of the sentence. And usually dashes can be used in this way to create some form of shock or humour. Now we have looked at dashes before in some of our writing, but have a look at that example, pause the video and have a go and see if you can write a sentence that uses a dash. Two dashes can mark out extra information in sentences which is similar to brackets. So here we introduce them as part of our parentheses. So we can have two commas, two brackets, or here we can have two dashes. Usually the information in those dashes would be extra information. Therefore the sentence would still make sense on its own if I removed that little extra information in the middle of my sentence. For example, Tilly, though I can't believe how, jumped straight over the car and ran off into the woods. So here between the dashes, this is our extra information to the sentence. So a bit like what brackets would do, or if I was to add an embedded clause with my commas. But they draw more attention to what is written. So because it is a little additional information, it's not adding full information about the cat or the car or running off to the woods, but it adds more of an emphasis of an opinion. So it's an additional part of the sentence that feels more into the sentence, more integrated. So it would make it harder to take that sentence out and make it sound as interesting as it is. So pause the video. I'd like you to have a go. See if you can use your two dashes in a sentence. Okay, your first activity I would like you to do. So I'd like you to have a go at using the semicolons, colons and dashes on the activity sheet that I've sent you, okay? I'd like you to see where and why the different punctuation marks could be used. So you will have a variation of sentences where you'll need to identify the punctuation, and you will also need to explain why that punctuation has been used in that sentence. So pause the video and have a go at that worksheet and we'll come back and do one more recap. Right, let's remember. So here, semicolon can be used to link two independent clauses together or to separate items in a list. Colons can be used to link independent clauses together or to introduce a list. And here we can use dashes to link independent clauses and also use them as parentheses to mark out extra information in our sentences. So your final task I would like you to do is I'd like you to have a look at the example text that you have been sent. Okay, so being able to use these punctuation correctly, it can help writers to create their own style of writing and it adds just that additional extra layer of meaning to their work. So I'd like you to see if you can find the examples of where those punctuation has been used in some of your best known children's authors. I'm sure all of you have read The Jungle Book, and I'm sure a lot of you know about The Tale of Peter Rabbit, and I guarantee you that you will all have read Peter Pan. If not, we will have to be looking at that when you come back. You will also need to explain why you think they've chosen to use that punctuation. So rather than you now writing sentences to include that punctuation, I want you to now think about you as the reader. How does that make you feel when you read it? What impressions are given in your mind, and how does that punctuation get you to that conclusion? Okay, so after this video, go back and have a go at those worksheets and jot down some of your ideas.